Hi everybody, Tim Gittens here, and this is Facebook Live from Long McQuade Markham, and I want to thank everybody for logging in. Sounds like we've got about 100 people so far. Over the next hour and a half or so, we're going to talk about turning all of this pile of stuff over here into a setup. Considerations like how comfortable it is, sound choices for the kind of music you're playing. So if you're somebody who sort of damages a lot of equipment, this might be something for you. If you experience any sort of pain while you're playing, this is something else we can talk about, and just making some choices that are sort of better for you musically to increase your enjoyment of playing the drums. My producer Matt has a message board up here, so if you have any questions about anything or would like to sort of comment, or hey, it's Facebook if you want to argue, we can take those as well. But again, it'll be a lot of things about equipment choices for the kind of things that you do, stick choices, some ergonomics. I'm not a kinesiologist, so a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about is my own personal experience. There'll be some anecdotal stories, so if you have stories that are also going to help the discussion, we'd love to hear them. And we're just going to go through the whole process of setting everything up from the ground up. With all the teaching that we've been doing online recently, I get to see what my students are playing at home. And there are a lot of things that I think people do to set up drums that either look like the magazine picture or it looks like something they've seen somewhere. So we're going to try to not set things up so that they're cool, but so that they work. So that you're not sort of reaching too far to get things and you're not hitting things in such a way it's going to break stuff. All right? And the first thing we're going to start with is your drum throne. Okay? Right here. So obviously everybody's a different height and different size and so forth like that. What I found is that if you set the top of your throne so it hits just about the top of your kneecap, that's a good place to start, right? So you're going to have your legs sitting at sort of this kind of angle. Now when they go up on pedals and so forth, that's also something that you can see. That should be no more than this. And we'll talk about the kind of thrones in a second. I'm going to grab another one. Hold on a second. So the one that I'm sitting on right here is a telescoping kind of here. Over here, Matt. So it's kind of a telescoping thing. Just would work like a cymbal stand would, right? Where you kind of raise it up and down like this. And it's got the memory lock on it. The other type that you're probably going to see a lot are these screw type ones, right? So all you do is you clockwise to go down, counterclockwise to go up, right? And again, just figure out where the top of your kneecap sits, and that's usually a great place to start. If you go too low, or if you go lower, say down here, you're going to sit like this, right? And as soon as you get your knees up on your pedals, your legs are now going to be at this kind of angle. So a chain reaction of things happens here. First of all, you're going to raise up like this, and we are bad for this as drummers. We're going to tip our hips backwards, and we start to arch over like this. So I notice a lot of guys will play like this, hunched over their drums. Okay, so a good way to get rid of that is just a little bit higher. Okay, and by now I'm sure most of you know where your diaphragm is, and here, if you're crunched over like this, it doesn't work nearly as well. So you want to be able to breathe properly by sitting up straight. Okay, again, I think Vinny Colaiuta in the early days back in the 70s used to sit way down here like this, right? And this puts a lot of stress on your hip flexor muscles. So it's tricky to sit upright properly and not really, kind of hunch over this way. We'll talk about that when it comes to snare angles as well. But for now, let's start with the seat being around the top of your kneecap. When you sit on the seat, let's move this out of the way. Again, there's some back and forth about this a little bit. I don't typically sit so that I'm at the back of the seat like this for two reasons. Number one, I'm a little further away from the drums. Number two, this puts I don't like the pressure here. I feel like my legs are sort of inhibited. Or if I sit kind of with my butt in the middle of the seat, and these part of my legs are hanging off of the throne, I feel like I got a little more movement. Plus, I'm also more inclined to sit forward, right? So as soon as I start sitting back like this, the first thing I want to do is crunch my back like that. Okay, so we can sit like this, sitting straight up like that. Okay, you can go higher if you like. You can maybe go a little bit lower. The higher you get, the more the angle of your drums is going to change, and we'll talk about that when we start setting up the toms. But for now, let's start with this height here. The next thing we're going to set up is very quickly. We're going to set up the bass drum. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to tune some of the muffling and so forth that's available with bass drums, and then we'll start setting up the rest of the kit. So give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a bass drum. Okay. So for this bad boy right here, there are a couple of Evans products going on here. If I can plug a product. The bass drum head And the heads, for those of you who don't know, are the parts that you play on, the plastic bits, right? And we're going to talk a lot about heads as well, because that changes the sound of your drums dramatically. And it's usually the part that gets wrecked, and people think that once the heads are wrecked, you got to get new drums. Not true. Okay? So right now on this one, it's called a GMAD, and it's got this muffling situation right here, a little plastic tray, and it's got a little foam insert. So if you're all wondering why you have to put pillows in your bass drum so it doesn't go kaboom like this, this helps to do a bit of that muffling for you. And on the inside, it's a little tough to see, but there's a sort of a pillow in there that's stuck to the bottom, and it kind of sits against the drum head like that. Whenever you hit it, it pops off. It's kind of like a little half pillow. So what you get instead of the big kaboom of your bass drum is you get a little more contained kind of sound like that. Okay. While we're talking about that, we've got bass drum pedals we can talk about too. This one right here is what's called a direct drive. So there's a solid piece of metal that's going to connect the cam, which is here, to the footboard. Okay. A lot of metal guys use this one. The reason they like it is because the backward motion and the forward motion are very, very immediate. Right. Solid thing going on here. And then one of the other ones you'll see is what's called a chain drive pedal. So similar kind of situation, but operated by a chain. The reason why this one doesn't come back as fast is if your spring is coming back, you got this. It's a little bit of delay time. Some people prefer this, some people prefer that. There are also strap drive pedals and all sorts of things. As far as the adjustments go, on the side of the pedal, you get your pedal spring. Sorry, we go forward. Does it matter, Matt? Forward is good. Okay, so we got the spring on this side, and you got the adjustment here. So loosening and tightening the spring is going to change a bunch of things. Right now, it's just pretty loose and it moves pretty freely. As I tighten this spring, that means it's going to spring back a lot more quickly. Now for me, the trade-off is I have to push a little harder to get the pedal down. So this is a consideration to make. If you've got these huge hulking calf muscles and you don't mind pushing a little harder, the pedal will come back a little faster to you. If you'd rather do less work, can you loosen this off, right? At the top here, we've got the throw adjustment. So what that means is, by the way, always keep drum keys with you. Right here, I can adjust the angle of the footboard like this. Okay. So if I set it like that, I'm pretty close to the head this way, and that means I don't have to push it very far so that it makes contact. If you're triggering your drums, or you're playing electronic drums and you want a lot of speed, you can do it this way. If you really want a whole lot of whoomp out of your drums, you can pull it way back here. Right? Gives you a lot more leverage and a lot more swing. Right? Kind of like swinging a golf club or a bat a little further back. Right? Ideal situation for me is about, I guess it's going to be about 45-degree angle. Right? And that gives me sort of the best of both worlds. I can get some leverage from back here, and I can get some speed from up here. And then you can make sure that this is tightened down. Right? And you can also adjust the length of the beater. So here's a beater shaft. Okay? And here's the beater. We can sort of pull this in and out as far as how much throw this way you want to have it, right? If it's too far, if say you're playing an 18-inch bass drum and you want to play down here, you can. If you want to, really swing for the fences, you can put it back this way. Okay, so lots of adjustment that you can do there. As with all the things I'm going to talk about today, experiment with it, see what works for you. We're going to talk a lot about comfort, and one of the things I want to talk about immediately is that there is a big difference between what you're comfortable with and what you're used to. So it's entirely possible to have something that's not efficient for you, but you've been playing that way for 10, 15, 20 years and you think, I'm comfortable with this, right? So by all means, experiment with things. Try raising your seat up, change the pedal adjustments, change the angle, change things and see what happens. We're all stuck at home anyhow, might as well try some new stuff, right? And you never know, you might come into something that actually feels better almost immediately. Over my playing career, I think I've changed everything about it. I sit lower, I sit higher. I have changed the tension on my pedal. I have changed the angle of my cymbals, a lot of things like that, just to see what sort of works best for me, right? So don't be afraid to experiment with different things. And that's, there are, again, a lot of other things. If you play two pedals, right, sort of a double pedal kind of a situation, adjusting the springs so that they feel about the same is going to be another challenge for you. If you're playing two actual bass drums, that's an even tougher one. Okay, we have a question here. Question about, sorry. Okay, suspend vanity, I'm going to put some glasses on. All right, here we go, live broadcast. All right, this says, A question on improving foot speed. What's the best adjustment for the beater and footboard? I think that if you're going to go for speed, more sort of, I guess, closer to the bass drum. Again, there are going to be trade-offs when it comes to speed and power, right? Very quickly, if we can talk about wear on the footboard, and maybe overhead for this one, Matt. On the footboard, there are different places on the here that are going to give you different effects, right? So if I play way back here like this, I get the most amount of leverage, so it's going to give me the most power, but not quite as fast. If I trade that off with being right up here, nice and fast, but I don't get anywhere near the speed. So ideal situation is to have your foot sort of right where the logo would be on this. And I kind of think right about where your toes meet the ball of your foot. Right? And that'll kind of give you the best of both worlds. As far as adjustment for the pedal tension is find that place where you can do the least amount of work and get the most amount of throw, right? So doing this, I'm not really doing much of anything. The pedal's doing most of the work. There are some companies out there who have these things called long boards, right? So you can play your foot way back here and it gives you more leverage. But adjust that spring so that you're doing the least amount of work that you can do, and it's coming back with the speed that you need. Okay, and it'll be a little bit of tweaking here and there. And hopefully that sort of answers the question. Cool. All right. Again, just experiment with it and see what gives you the best effect. If you sit too far forward on the pedal, again, get lots of speed, but you'll lose the power. If you're triggering, that's not a big deal. If you're playing back here and you're swinging for the fences, playing classic rock, that's cool too. All right. If we wanted to talk about bass drum pedal technique, we could be here all day. But while we're here, you've got a couple of options. You've either got your heel flat or your heel up. Okay. For me, I'm not a big fan of having the heel far up like this for two reasons. Number one, I got all this tension now in my calf, right? And if there's one thing that's going to kill your endurance and sometimes your sound, it's having tight muscles. So I have my heel elevated off the pedal, but if you can see, it's kind of parallel to the floor. So this gives me the most kind of freedom of movement up and down without having all this tension in my calf, right? If you're playing heel flat, that's fine. In either situation, don't go too far up the footboard, right? Because you've got all these trade-offs. And very quickly, hopefully it's not a digression, watch out how much you use this muscle here, your quadriceps, right? If you flex that, the whole design of that muscle is to do this with your leg, right? So if I'm tightening this up while I play, I start creeping up the pedal like this, especially if you're playing in your socks, right? So make sure that doesn't tighten up too much and you're trying to, because you will creep up the pedal. Again, if you're barefoot or playing in socks, even more so. To that point of playing barefoot, socks, or shoes, really up to you. Some people will tell you they're comfortable doing one thing. Since a lot of us are playing indoors these days, you might play in your socks more and get comfortable with that. I have a couple of friends who play barefoot. I play in whatever I happen to show up to the gig in. If I have dress shoes on or tennis shoes or whatever, that's what I play in. But be comfortable with, again, just sort of, so that your foot's not cramped up and you're not, sort of sliding all over the place too much, right? I like to have a bit of movement if I need to move back and forth on the pedal, right? So I don't want it to be too sticky, right? I wouldn't use running shoes per se, but at the same time, I don't want to use leather-soled shoes and slide off into the bass drum. Cool. So while we're talking about the bass drum, we're going to switch from this bass drum over to the other kit, and we're going to start putting things together as far as ergonomics and sound. Okay, so 1 second, I'm going to switch this one bass drum out. Okay, I'm going to take this off here. So this bass drum, at the moment, doesn't have anything in it. It's empty. Let me grab a pedal. Let's take this one. It's empty. There is nothing inside. There is a small hole in the front. And if you don't know, most of the reason why we have a hole in the front of the bass drum is so that you can get a microphone in there. So if you're not going to mic your bass drum and you want to keep the front head solid, cool. You get a big, huge, fat sound out of it, but it's going to ring a lot. So right now, all that's going on with this bass drum is there's a small hole in the front head, and somebody has put some tape on the batter side. Batter side is the side you play on. Resonant side is the side that you don't play on. Okay, and it looks like we've got another question coming in. So let me grab my eyeballs. And what does this say? Do you bury the beater or let it come off? That's an excellent question. Thanks, Dave. Dave Patel, excellent drummer and all-around good guy. The sound is going to change, and it's going to depend on how your bass drum is tuned, right? So if you've got pillows in there, which we're going to do in a second, you can bury the beater, and it won't make too much of a difference as far as the sound because it's going to go thump anyhow. So here's the beater coming off the drum head. It's going to mute it a bit more, right? So that's a consideration if your bass drum is really, really resonant and open. Okay, where do you recommend getting your bass drum pedal power from? Foot, knee, or full on from the hip? Okay, so this is, we talked a little bit about this. It's going to be a combination of it. What you're doing is you're using most of your hip, and then for the bigger notes, right? Again, don't use your quadriceps because that will push, you know, your foot up into the pedal, into the bass drum thing here. So most of it should come from dropping the leg in. Right? So your hip is going to lift it a bit, and then you just use gravity to let it fall in there, right? The more that you relax that and let the pedal do what it's going to do, because the design of a pedal, of course, is to turn this into that, right? So the more that you go down, the more the pedal's going to go forward. So I don't want to do any kind of sort of diagonal motion into the pedal. So a lot of it is coming from this hip flexor right here, right? And if I need more power, I might sort of flex my ankle a little bit this way to dig in that way here, right? But I'm definitely not going to sort of push and stand myself up like this. So to the point that our friend Dave was talking about, if you're burying the beater, you're going to add this tension to your leg, and you're also going to get a different sound out. So if that's the sound you want, like if you're playing, I'm going to play a little samba thing there where you got a longer note in the middle, right? That'll happen. And once again, if your bass drum is full of pillows and stuff like that, it's going to go thump no matter what. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do exactly that. We're going to take this front head off, and this is a great one for moms and dads who have gotten the drum kit from the store, and it just comes, and the whole thing sounds like a kaboom. So we're going to take off the front head. We'll talk about how to tune this in a second. And this is arguably the most common thing that people do with a bass drum, is to put some kind of packing material inside it. Okay, and here's that hole we were talking about before. So sort of to get microphone access, but it does sort of kill the sound a little bit. Right. And I could flip this up on its face, but I'm kind of being lazy. Don't want to wreck Matt's great shot here, so we take these guys off. Back in the 70s, what everybody always used to do was take their front head off altogether. And this was back in the days when people didn't do a lot of miking of drums. So you'd have this big splatty bass drum sound coming out, nothing impeding it this way. So there we go. So while we're at it, these are called tension rods, right? And we're going to take all those off so that the front head comes off. Okay. And like that. Excellent. Good. So there we go. Wide open bass drum. So this is what your bass drum looks like on the inside if you've never seen the inside of it. And again, the sound you're going to get out of this is going to be wildly different than with the front head on. So very splatty kind of sound, right? That sounds a lot like what everybody used to play in the 70s. So what we're going to do is take our trusty blanket, and we're going to put it so that it touches the front head like this. Now, that would probably stay there for about 2 or 3 minutes if you were just play it and not put any weight on it. So what guys used to do is put a sandbag on it or some kind of weight so that it wouldn't slide forward. So right now, I've got it sitting about that much, I guess about that much, sitting up into the front head here, and the rest of it just laying in the bottom. So immediately you're going to be able to hear a sound when we play this. Right? Okay. So now back to our question about the burying of the beater. So here's buried, here's not buried. Pretty much the same sound, right?
One more time.
Yep.
Do it again.
Okay, sure. We got this, not buried, buried. Okay, more or less the same kind of sound that we got going on for both. Okay, so now what I can do, that I've got my favorite bit of laundry in here, is I can put the front head on. What I like to do is have it so that a little bit of this is touching the resonant head. Okay, so once again, batter side is the side you play on, resonant head is the side that gives you the resonance. Go figure. All right, so we're gonna put this back on, and again, it's just sort of touching on the inside here. Make that nice and even like that, and then we'll put our tension rods back in. We're going to do a lot more stuff on tuning things, but we're going to talk about how to do that just for a second here. When you tune a drum, you shouldn't go around in a circle. And if you really want to dig into the tuning angle of things, there are lots and lots of things online. And as usual, lots of guys have different ideas about how to do it. But from my experience, it seems to be better to do it sort of going across the drum. So we'll more or less assign a clock number to each lug or each tension rod and go that way. Okay. For a lot of people, the idea of tuning a bass drum seems mysterious because we're all looking for that thump sound anyhow. So it will affect the sound of your drum depending on what pitch you have here. Right? And if you're going to play a wide open bass drum, which a lot of guys do, right? A lot of people do play a bass drum that's wide open, meaning there's nothing inside it and both heads are solid heads. So you get this big woofy resonant sound. And you're going to find a lot more kind of sound considerations when you do that. If you have a really tight batter head and a really loose resonant head, you get this big sort of fat kaboom kind of sound. If you reverse that and have a loose batter head and a tight resonant head, you get more pitch and a lot more splat out of your bass drum. So let's do that. And I think this is our last one. Yes. Good. Okay. There we go. Okay, so more or less, tighten everything so it's finger tight as much as you can. Okay. So now, and again, we'll go over this when we tune the snare drums. Assign, so that's 1 o'clock, like 3 o'clock kind of thing, 5 o'clock, 6, however you're going to do it. When you tighten one, the next one you should do, so if that's 1 o'clock, go over here to 6:45 or whatever that is. Tighten that one up a couple turns, right? Next one I want to do is up here. Then over here. Oops. Smooth. Okay. Then I'm going to go over here. Then I'm going to go over here. Okay, so we're going across the drum. I'm trying to make sure we're getting more or less even tension. So I've got a little bit of pitch on this front head right now. Not a ton, but some. And I'm kind of tuning it by feel as much as I am by sound. Trying to get even sound. This is going to affect the tuning across the drum too, because you don't typically have a hole in the rest of your drum heads. So now, let's have a listen and see what that sounds like. And I'll move that over there. That should make. There we go. Let's sort of aim it in that direction. Okay, so now. Okay, and again, because we've got the packing material inside, there's going to be less difference between this and this. But you can still kind of hear it and feel it. So let me just tighten this up a little bit. Right? So ideal for miking, if you're going to play in a loud room with a bunch of guitar players and no microphones, not a great sound. Right? So far, that's where we're going to go with that. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is your snare drum. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with your snare drum, so I'm going to grab one of them. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll start with the angle. Now, I know that some of my friends and people that know me always ask why I've got the drum angled away from me like this. So I'm going to talk about that. I admittedly saw Jojo Mayer doing this and thought it was really cool, and then the explanation he gave for it was a great one. So I'm going to talk about that, and then we'll talk about angles for your snare drum. Okay? Ideally, it should be sitting sort of where your waist is, kind of thing, right? Like this. I've seen lots of guys play with the snare drum way down low. like way down low. So we'll flatten it out in a second. But the reason that I do this is that if I'm sitting this way, right, that's kind of the angle that, so it's sort of angled away, but the drumsticks are parallel to the drum head. Right? So I don't really have to do much of anything. My arms are in this nice relaxed position here. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do any of that, right? And I play about 65 or 70% of my time traditional grip, which again we'll talk about. But this allows me to do both. If I need to grab the rims on stuff, heads up. Right, the rims are right there. So I don't have to dig down. So to my point before about setting the drum too low, let's do this. Let's get this kind of flattened out first. And I'm going to put it down, because I've seen lots of guys do this. Where they got the snare drum sitting down, sort of like where their legs would sit like this. Right? And they're practically punching themselves in the leg to play the snare drum, or they're down in here like this. Right? Immediately, the first thing I'm going to do is slouch. Right? And secondly, I can't really, for me to use my fingers for anything, if I want to do, right, I now have to adjust all this way. So I'm going to keep mine sort of up or around where my waist is. The other thing that frightens me when the snare gets too low and angled even towards you is that you're kind of looking to hit the drum at this kind of angle. Right? If you find that you're denting a lot of drum heads, so they've got those little pits in them, right, especially your snare drum, there's a good possibility that what you're doing is you're hitting the drum at this kind of angle. So the tip of your stick is digging into the drum like this, right? And that's gonna make a big dent and a pit in your drum set. Okay? It doesn't really need to be like that. So what I would suggest is try and find that place where it's kind of, and we'll keep it flat for now, just to sort of keep everybody happy. Oops, where's my live broadcast? Love it. Okay, so I'm about, okay, again, probably about where my waist is where I'm going to keep that. Okay, and this means that just so as not to weird everybody out, I won't angle it away, but that's a consideration that I make. If you're a guy who sits really high, by the way, let's say, for example, you're sitting like way up here, that might be one of the times where you want to tip the snare drum a little further away from you, right? Because as you stand up, this kind of angle happens, right? So if you're going to sit way up in the air, maybe consider tipping your snare drum like that. A lot of guys, like in the jazzy days of old, would tip the snare drum on a serious angle away from them, like this kind of thing, and do it almost up in here. Like you watch old Buddy Rich videos and his snare drum is kind of this kind of thing. Because, where does this come from? When drums were being held on the side and you were marching. Right? So doing this is great with your right hand. Doing this with your left hand sucks. Right? So that's where that got developed. Right? So I've seen, again, guys doing jazzier setups will set up like this. Kind of sloped away from them that way. Okay? Whatever it is you do, like I said at the beginning, feel free to experiment with stuff. If it works for you, great. If it's not working for you, try something else. Where's my, here we are. While we're on the snare drum, let's talk about some of the parts and some of the things we can do to get some different sounds. Your snare drum head should be relatively tight. Again, batter head, snare side in this case, okay? Should be relatively tight because you're going to do things that involve bounces and rolls and so forth like that, right? So I want that to have some tension. If it's too loose, you kind of get this kabong, right? On the side here, we've got what's called a throw off, okay? And that just disengages the snares at the bottom. The snares at the bottom are the wires at the bottom, right? So. That's what it sounds like with them turned off. Okay? And you can adjust how tight those snares are by, in this case, I've got two wheels on it. I guess that's up here. I've got two tension adjustments on either side. Right? I can either use this one or that one. But as I loosen that off, so here's the sound we get with them pretty tight. I'm just going to start gradually loosening it off. Sound gets wider and splattier if you're doing stuff like this. Okay, and then we're going to tighten it back up again. Put it in the middle. Okay. You guys saw me take this off. And I'm sure you all have seen these before, these little donut rings. What it does is it takes all the high overtones from the edges just kind of dampens them down a bit. So what you get is a little more sort of focused, kind of sound like that, right? If you're playing in an unfinished basement, this is a great kind of sound to have, because anything in an unfinished basement goes kablooey, okay? If I can take a second to talk about that whole unfinished basement thing and the amount of sound, please protect your ears, okay? Some kind of hearing protection, especially if you're a younger player, start doing it now, get used to it now. Whether it's earplugs, you can do those foam ones that go inside, you can get custom-made earplugs, all sorts of things like that, but you have to protect your ears. A lot of the frequencies that are involved in playing this stuff will get in there and make a serious mess of your hearing. For you older, experienced players, you've probably got this going on already, is that lovely little sss that you hear. It's called tinnitus. Once you have it, it doesn't go away. So I haven't heard dead silence in about 15 years. Okay? So, yeah, and almost anybody who's played in a loud situation, and I'm sure the thought going through your head is, oh, but it sounds so much better and feels so much better. The human ear is an amazing tool as far as discerning pitch, timbre, tone, and things like that. It absolutely sucks at discerning volume. So if you're in a loud room and you walk in and it feels like your hair is going to fall out because it's so loud, within 10 minutes it won't sound that loud, which means, oh, no problem, I'll just stay here. And all the damage is being done. Okay, so whatever it is you're going to cover your ears with, you can invest in some earplugs. I think there are some that you can get for like maybe $100, and they're custom made. They're a flat EQ response. If you're going to use those foam orange ones you get from the drugstore, that's fine. Rifle range ones, any kind of thing like that. They've got some different stick companies make them as well. So do by all means protect your hearing, because once it goes, it doesn't come back, right? And again, for me, strangely enough, for all the things that I do, I enjoy silence, and I don't have silence anymore. Okay, so make sure that you're protecting your ears as much as possible when you can. Okay, so there we are. It's the snare drum. Again, just very quickly, I'm going to go over the parts of this while we're sitting here. The bottom, we've got the snares. Okay. We've got the throw off, which is the part where we loosen and tighten. And it looks like we've got a question coming in here. Okay, George is asking tips on how and when to replace your snares. You can replace them as often as you like. They don't need to be like changed every time you change your heads or anything like that. There was a snare drum I used to have that was one of these piccolo ones, and I used to pop wires off of them from playing them. So if it gets down, you know, an 18-strand snare turns into a 12-strand snare, that's probably a good one. There are some different ones out there. They're brass. You can get some catgut ones, sort of things like that. But to change them, maybe change them like once a year, once or twice a year. If they're sustaining any sort of damage, like if they've been dented or they're getting stretched out or stuff like that, then it's probably time to replace them. But they don't need sort of as frequent replacement as your drum heads do. Hopefully that sort of answers that. And again, to a small degree, and this is going to be sort of a blanket statement for a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, is some things will change dramatically. Other things are going to be personal choice, and whether or not you can hear them. There is a slightly different sound that comes from brass wires versus steel ones or catgut ones or whatever it is. To my ears, it's not dramatic enough to go into a whole thing about it. But if you can hear those kinds of subtle differences, then by all means, right? Get some different situations. I'll show you on the bottom of this one snare drum one thing though. HQ Percussion makes these things called EQ snares, and it's got this gap in the middle. So what this does is it sort of reduces the amount of buzz that you get from your toms. And I know you've all had this happen where you hit either the 10-inch tom or the 12-inch tom, and you go doom, doom, and you get that buzz happening. So this is to sort of combat that. It's not perfect because, I mean, physics is physics, but these are a little better that way. And it's just still, 18 snares, you just got them split up in the middle like that. There are some snares that have 42 strands, which gives you a whole lot of snap and whap and snare sound like that. But yeah, as far as replacing them, they don't need to be replaced as often as anything else. Again, if you can hear differences, try changing them and see what you like the sound of. Okay? Shell materials on snare drums go from steel to aluminum to brass, different kinds of wood. That's going to affect the warmth of it. So very quickly, if we can talk about that. Steel and basically any kind of metal is going to give you a more, I guess, bright, almost penetrating sound. If you're in a situation where you need lots of projection, maybe a metal snare drum. Different kinds of wood will give you different sort of warmer sounds and what have you like that. So it really does depend on the kind of sound that you're looking for, you're trying to hear. Again, experimentation is a great way to do that. The depth of the snare changes a lot too. We can go from, this is a 5.5 inches deep. Piccolo snares are usually somewhere between 3 and 4. You've got these deep shelled snare drums that are between 8 and 9 inches deep. Give you this big, wide, fat sound. As you do that, of course, as you get further away, the snares are further away from where you're hitting, so the response isn't as immediate. So if you're playing like lots of really, really fast stuff, deep snare, maybe not the way to go. Okay? Oh, we got one more question coming in. What do you recommend for a singing drummer as far as earplugs go? Oh, I do a lot of that. I do a lot of that. With most of the bands that I play in, I do a lot of singing. So what I usually use for that is, I'll just use my in-ear monitors. And I've got, it's not an elaborate, expensive rig that I have, but it allows me to keep something in my ears. What I do is have, it's like a little Behringer mixer off to the side here. I get a feed from the board, and I dial in sort of whatever the monitor guy is giving me. And then I have another microphone that just sort of sits out and faces the audience or faces the rest of the stage, so I can use that as my ambient mic. And I can then control how much of that is coming into my ears. So I've got them sitting in my ear, and just because I didn't like the feel of this, I would use the ambient mic. So you can use, again, depending on what kind of cash you have to spend, you can get the elaborate in-ear monitors, or you can use, I was using the ones from my phone for the longest time. So it provides some degree of protection, and I can also monitor at the same time. If you're just singing and you don't have in-ear monitors, what I used to do was use those wax earplugs. I put them in this way, and just sort of squish one of them so I could hear a bit of what was coming in here. You're still going to hear a degree of what you're singing through your jawbone, so it'll sound a little fatter. It's not great for knowing how loud you're singing, right? But if you're not using some kind of in-ear monitor, that at least gives you something, right? And again, you're going to hear it through your jawbone. Kind of like this sort of thing when you're trying to hear a better note. It will change stuff. But for singing drummers, something like that where you can adjust the shape of it. Like I said, either the wax ones, the custom-made ones are pretty good for that with the flat EQ response as well. Okay, cool. All right, so just talked a bit about snares. When you're tuning these things, the bottom head can be pretty tight, and the top head, again, relatively tight. As you loosen them, you get the bigger, fatter sound, but you do have a bit of a trade-off for response, right? So this is something to consider. All right, on next to, we're going to start adding some toms and some hardware and just talk about angles and so forth. Very quickly, what I'm trying to do, and hopefully it looks like this from all angles, is I'm going to try and set up the drums in kind of like a wave that comes out from my belly button kind of thing, right? Like we talked about with the snare drum, if you're not careful about the angle at which you're hitting things, you're going to dent stuff, okay? Or break a lot of sticks. I don't typically break a lot of sticks. I play hard, but I don't typically break a lot of sticks because of the angle I'm hitting the drum at, right? So if I do something like this, right? And anybody who's a physicist out there can back me up on this. But I've got all this energy transfer here versus spread out over here, right? So much more meat here, and I'm spreading it out over a much bigger area, right? So if I hit too much like this, I'm going to start popping sticks, and I'm going to start denting this drum head, right? So I've just dispersed the hit over a wider area and the energy transfer of it. Okay, so let's start with a little bit on sort of mounting hardware. We're going to start with this bad boy here. So a couple of different ways, and we don't have a rack set up here, but we could, but we don't. So what's going on here is I've got one of these little multi-clamps, and just a tom arm kind of situation like this. So this is not mounted to the bass drum. This gives a couple of advantages or disadvantages. Let's call it a change because, we don't want to color that conversation any particular way. So it keeps the bass drum and this tom separate. So I'm not going to have, when I hit that, that's the only sound I hear. I don't have that ringing as well, right? If it were mounted on the stand, as soon as I hit the bass drum, the vibrations are going to travel from the bass drum through the mounting hardware into the drum. So you get this. Now again, if you like the sound of a big resonant sounding kit, having your drums mounted on the bass drum is not the worst thing. It will probably affect sustain or the projection of your bass drum a little bit, but for most of the people that I've spoken to and from my own experience, it doesn't affect it so much that you're going to hear that dramatic a difference. So it's more sort of utility and sort of access if you want. The advantage to doing this, of course, is I can move this drum anywhere that I like this way. For rack systems, what a rack is it's a series of tubes that you can hang drums on and so forth like that. That'll help them all to resonate together while keeping your bass drum isolated. So again, sort of personal preference this way. Once again, I'm trying to have this at an angle where, right, that's a pretty safe angle for me to hit at, right? If I don't want to have it any more like this. If I did this kind of thing, which, you know, I've seen people do, right? So if you're going to punch at your drums, you're gonna get a dent in this drum head, right? So it's great because it's looking you right in the face, but it's not really the best angle for your hand to hit. While I'm talking about this is a good time to talk about moms and dads who've got little guys and little girls playing big drum sets. Okay, it's very difficult to get these things at a comfortable angle if you're this tall and your bass drum is this size and you got like this giant 13-inch tom. So what that allows you to do if you have it on the stand is move it to the side. Let's say, for example, we do this kind of thing here, and we decided, all right, that's still way too high. Well, let me move this over to the side. I can drop this whole thing down like another couple of inches and so forth and sit it this way, right? So it gives you a bit of flexibility to move it around that way. The other trade-off, of course, is that your cymbals are going to make your tom resonate too. So every time you hit a crash cymbal, you might hear a bit of coming out of it as well, right? So all the time trade-offs. So there's that. And okay, so that's pretty good there. So far, so good. Next thing we're going to talk about, I'll get this other tom here in a second, but I want to talk about this hi-hat because we kind of skipped it. Of all the pieces of your drum set, this is the one that gives you the biggest headaches if you don't know how they work. Again, moms and dads, I'm talking to you, younger players, and so forth like that. So let's go through what we got. For reasons that I have yet to understand, the first thing everybody always wants to do when they have their hi-hats is spin them. Okay? This is a bad idea. Let me show you why. Inside your hi-hat, you have a couple of moving parts. So I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to undo this. A second. Okay, let's just loosen that down. So, this is the pull rod. Okay, and it threads into. I'll show you where it threads into like this. Okay, so I can take that off. Right here, if you can see this on this side over here, there's a bolt that this threads into. So this comes apart mostly so that if you're moving your drum kit around, you can take it into smaller pieces. Okay, so this attaches in here like this. If that becomes undone, again, from spinning your hi-hat, like you're a DJ or whatever, you're going to step on the pedal, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. We'll put the hi-hat together properly, but let's just get this point made. So, here, like that. So I've been sitting here playing my hi-hat. And I've been spinning and spinning and spinning the hi-hat like this, and looks really cool. And then all of a sudden, at some point, my pedal's going to go down to the ground, and my hi-hat's not going to do anything. Because what I've done is I've unscrewed the top part of this from the part that attaches to the pedal. Okay? So if you have any idea that you want to keep spinning your hi-hats, not really a great idea. So let's go back through the process of setting this up in the first place. Okay? So I'm going to take this out here, wing nut adjustment. I'm amazed, by the way, at how many of these 10 and 12-year-olds I have out there who are really, really good at writing code and designing apps and can do all kinds of amazing things with a cell phone and don't know how a wing nut works. Amazing. Anyhow, so I'm going to thread this back in here like this. Okay, and it's going to go over here. So some considerations, and this is normally these personal taste things. I had a drum key, which I do. Oh, here it is. Okay. How high to set your hi-hat? This depends on a couple of things. Number one, whether you're going to play it with your right hand or your left hand. So let's start out with, if you're going to play what's called open hands, we're going to have this a lot lower. You'll see why in a second. So let's lower that down that way. Okay, and tighten this back up. Okay. Another very, very mysterious part of the hi-hat stand for people is the hi-hat clutch. So I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out of the box. Kind of looks like this. Okay, so we've got these two guys here. Okay, we've got two felts, and you've got the bottom, we'll call it a nut. Okay, So your cymbals should sit on either side, or felt on either side. Again, we'll talk about this in a minute or two. Avoid metal-to-metal contact with your cymbals at all costs. If you don't know what keyholing is, you can get this big, huge tear in this part of the cymbal, and it affects the sound, and if you're into trading cymbals, it will drop the value. So make sure that you've got one felt on one side, like this, and one on the other side, like that. Okay? Then I'm just going to thread this on here. Okay. And we'll probably talk about this again in a second, but don't have this tightened so far down that it doesn't move. Okay. And Matt's got a great video he's going to show everybody when we get to that point about why you don't do that with your cymbals. So, bottom cymbal, usually the heavier of the two, right? Not necessarily, but usually the heavier of the two is going to go on this way and sit on that little foam situation there. This one is going to go on top. Okay, this here. So this adjusts how loose the cymbal is this way. So once you've got that at about the place where you like it, you say, okay, that's a good amount of movement right about there. Good. I'm going to tighten this one against it so that it doesn't keep moving around when I play. Okay, so these two kind of tighten against each other. And then hopefully it doesn't move. All right, so then this is going to, right here, it's going to thread onto, or at least not thread onto, but sit onto the pull rod. Okay, so now, another thing that happens pretty commonly with people is they'll have their wing nut for their adjustment set up here, right? And sitting playing like, and then that happens, right? So what they've done is they've accidentally hit the wing nut and spun it out. So a quick way to fix that is to make sure that the wing nut is facing away from you when you set up your hi-hat, okay? As far as how high do you open this? Well, again, partially personal taste, but a good idea is to put your foot on the bass drum pedal, set it against the bass drum beater, or the bass drum head. Push your left foot down so it feels like it hits bottom about the same place, so your feet feel like they're doing that kind of thing, not this or that or in different places. So wherever it feels like they're about hitting bottom together, and I want to tighten this guy up here like this. Okay? So now, both feet hit bottom about the same place. So like I said, you can have your hi-hat on this side, nice and low, if you're playing open hands. Okay? And ergonomically speaking, this is not the worst way in the world to do things, because you got your whole kit open to you, right? So I can have my hi-hat on this side. If, however, you want to go the more traditional route and have your hi-hat higher, okay, give yourself some room in between. What I do not recommend for anybody to do at any point in their life, ever, 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 is to do this. Okay? Chopping at the side of your hi-hat like this. Okay? Okay, I see way too many guys doing this. You're going to chew through sticks like there's no tomorrow, and you're going to end up breaking the edge of the cymbal. Matt, you think you want to do that video now?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about very quickly what happens to a cymbal when you hit it. So Matt's going to throw a video up here for you. This is Mike Mangini doing the super slow motion version of what happens when you hit a cymbal. Okay.
Hit it!
That's outrageous. It's unbelievable. Watch the deflection you put in carry that wave all around the ring, and now it just gets to the back, and then it starts going nuts.
Yeah. And then it comes back to the front. I've been beating the heck out of them for years, and they haven't broken. I can't even believe what I'm looking at. That's unbelievable.
Clearly, Time Warp is on a roll.
Right. Now, if it's loose on the stand, like this, that's cool. It can take that, it can absorb it, especially bigger cymbals and ones that'll flex a little bit. If it's a smaller, more dense cymbal, it's not going to be able to take that same kind of hit. So if you're on the edge, hitting that with the amount of deflection that it had, and it can't do this, all of that is going to happen this way, and your cymbal will crack, right? I've seen broken hi-hat cymbals like that because dudes are smashing on the edge of it like that. It's supported a little bit by the bottom hi-hat cymbal, but if you're, that's a wide open cymbal. Okay, so whatever it is that you do, if you're going to set your cymbals up, try not to have it so that you're hitting on the edge this way. So your hi-hat should be able, and realistically for me, the sound is a bit better when I play on top of it anyhow. So I get the same kind of trashy, biting sound from playing the shoulder of the stick on the top. As I would if I were doing this. Right, same effect, but I'm not damaging the cymbal and I'm not wrecking my sticks. Okay, so set it up so that you've got some room in between, like this kind of thing, or however high you're going to set it, but so that you can hit the top of the hi-hat with the shoulder of the stick, and you're not chopping at the edge of it. Okay, and it should always be sort of where it's comfortable for you to sit upright and do it. Okay, cool. While we got the cymbal set up here, we might as well talk about that one. Again, when you set your cymbals up, they got to be able to move, right? If you have this thing tightened down so that it can't move, when you hit it, it's going to flex, and eventually it will break. I was going to wait till a little bit later to talk about cymbal choices, but we can sort of touch on that now. Consider the kind of music that you're going to play, the intensity with which you play. So if you're a heavy hitter, maybe paper-thin cymbals are not the thing for you. Okay? The bigger they get and the sort of thinner they are, they've got a bit more flex and can move a bit more with what's going on. For a long time, people were marketing rock cymbals as these big, thick, heavy things. And yes, they were loud, but they're also more brittle, right? So if you can hit it well, and it'll sort of splash off to the side, we'll talk about how to hit that in a second. But if you got that kind of thing, oh, what do you got here? Tips, preferences on angling the bottom hi-hat cymbal. Good question. Sorry I missed that. On the bottom here, if you can see, I guess it's on this side here, Matt, you've got the cymbal tilter. So depending on the kind of cymbals you have, some of them have vented holes at the bottom. If it doesn't have that, it can get the sort of airlock in between them, right? So you kind of lose sound on that chick sound. As you angle that, one side's going to hit sooner than the other. So if I tilt that, let's see this way. The chick sound should be a little louder because now it's going to hit first, right? Okay, so mostly that's going to be an issue if you're playing left foot hi-hat. Okay, some people do a lot of that, some people don't do very much of it. I do a ton of it, and mine is angled pretty much like this. I've got a lot open on one side, not as much on the other. But that's the cymbal tilter. Play with it a bit to see what works for you, and listen for the sound that you're going to get from it. So the more tilts you have, the more it's going to hit this side first and then that side. It's also going to be a lot louder, right? Again, if your cymbals are vented at the bottom, if they've got some holes at the bottom, you might not have as much of an issue with that. Hopefully that answers that question. Cool. My apologies for skipping over that. Kind of an important thing. Back to the point about picking your cymbals. So if you're going to be playing a lot of really loud stuff, is there any tonal change when clamping the cymbal down? Not too much, I don't think, because well, what you would notice if it were mic'd is you'd see the cymbal's going to move and face a lot of different directions. So, for example, if you're in the studio, and Dave is feeding me questions because, again, Dave knows all this stuff. Mics pointing in different directions are going to pick up the cymbal as it points in different directions, right? So it's going to sound, here, check this out. Okay, so it moves around a little bit and shapes like this. If I tighten this down, which I'm reluctant to do, but I'm going to do it anyway just because, hey, why not? It can mute it a bit more. But the biggest change for me is that it's not going to spread the sound around as much, right? So it's going to be a lot more sort of straight up and down, if that's a consideration. I'm always going to err on the side of letting the cymbal move more freely, and again, unless somebody's really paying me a whole lot of money to have a specific cymbal sound where it's got to be clamped down and not move, I'm gonna err on the side of this moving around a bit more just to keep it safe. All right, what do we got here? Rob, how do you recommend setting up a hi-hat when you're using a double pedal? So that's a good one. I guess you can see it probably from overhead there. If I were going to set up a second pedal, I would probably move my hi-hat stand over here. And a lot of them will do this thing where you can adjust let's say for example, you can spin the legs. I don't think this one does it. Yeah, this one doesn't do it. But some hi-hat stands will have it so that you can, that one does. Excuse me 1 second. You can adjust the bottom pedal this way, okay? So if I have to have another pedal stuck in there, I can adjust my leg on my hi-hat stand out of the road so I can put the other pedal in there, right? So it'll fit right there. And usually on the outside. So I can't imagine anybody having their hi-hat on the inside and then the bass drum pedal on the other side, right? So they're going to be sitting kind of here sort of thing, right? And most hi-hat stands, like I said, these days are going to have that kind of swivel adjustment on the legs so that you can move it. And they got to be comfortable. So if you had your pedal here, probably the cam bar going across would go this way. And that should pretty much stay out of the way of your snare stand as well, right? So the hardware is a consideration when it comes to where you're going to put stuff, right? Always the first thing is it going to be comfortable, right? So we'll go back to our regular hi-hat, already in progress. Cool. Okay. So far we covered that part of it. Okay. With your hardware, while we're talking about adjustments, there is only so tight that you need your hardware to be. One of the pet peeves I have is people who will clamp down their hardware so that you need pliers or an acetylene torch to loosen it. That's a great way to wreck your hardware, and if it's going to move, you're probably doing something wrong as far as playing. Okay, so it's not likely that you need to have things as tight as you do, right? Lubricate the stuff once in a while, and you can use like lithium grease or Vaseline, something that's a little thicker. If you use WD-40 or some thin kind of thing like that, it's likely to spin out while you're playing. Same goes for your tension rods, right? Whenever you change your heads, dip them in some Vaseline, and that'll keep them nice and lubricated. You don't have a lot of stuff squeaking or wearing out. But whenever you tighten your hardware, it should be finger tight. You don't need to crank on it, right? If it's moving and you got to crank on it that much, it's time to replace something. Okay, but please don't crank on your hardware so tight that it's impossible to move. I see this happen a lot on either house drum kits or shared drum kits. Rehearsal studios are really bad for that, where somebody's gone in there and just gorilla fisted the whole thing and just tightened it down so it doesn't move anymore. Okay, so we talked about having this tom sitting on the stand like that. The next thing we do is have it mounted on the bass drum. Couple of things are going to happen here depending on the depth of the shell. Right, you're only going to be able to sit it at so many angles, right? So if I have it here, about as low as I'm going to be able to manage is kind of here, right? Because otherwise it's going to hit into the shell or hit into the bass drum, and you get this, right? I'm going to dig holes in it. If you got a really beautiful finish on your bass drum, then you end up with these big chunks taken out of it, right? So. Right now I've got this kind of set up this way, and when I put the floor tom up, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. And what we're talking about again before, as far as where you can reach it and hit at what angle. So if I come around, right, I want to do this. I'm not likely to do this as I come around, right? So especially if I'm doing this, I'm going to go down this way. So I want to have this kind of wave kind of thing going down here. Having these so that they're on this side of your drum kit like this is just going to take you a long time to get to stuff. Again, for moms and dads, I get it if your kid is, like 4'1" and you're trying to set up these big giant drums. So try not to have them set too far apart, right? Whether you want them sort of this close or further apart, I'm usually like 2 fingers kind of thing, right? And that means if they're gonna move, they're not gonna hit each other, right? When you're setting up your stuff, try to avoid metal to metal contact with anything. Like I don't wanna have this happening when I'm playing here, clackety clack, 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 clack. Right? If you're recording, that's definitely a problem. But just somewhere where you can reach them comfortably, depending on the height that you want to have them. I don't know if can you see it from that angle, Matt? The height of that rim from the bass drum?
Yes.
Okay, so right now I've got like about a knuckle in there, and that usually stops it from touching the bass drum. And I've seen, if it's sort of further into the drum that way, these big gouges out of bass drums from hardware smashing into it like that. So just make sure that when you set it up, it's not slamming into the shell, slamming into other parts of your drum set. Okay? We're probably going to tune this bad boy too. Okay, let's do that now.
I have a question.
Sure. What we got here? Paul Robertson. Sorry, I can't see that. Flip it around a little bit more. Okay. What's the, sorry, let's see. Okay. What's the reason I see some drummers removing bottom heads from toms? Mostly projection, right? Again, this happened a lot more in probably in the 70s and stuff when there wasn't a whole lot of drum mics the way that we have them now. But if you take the bottom heads off, the sound just flies directly out of there. So you lose a lot of the tone from having those two heads because the shell gets more engaged when you do that. But you take the bottom heads off and the sound just comes straight out like a bullet. So what you trade in tone, you get in projection. They had these crazy drums, I think it was like 1978 or something, called these North projection drums. And it was just, there were no bottom heads, but they had this little funnel kind of thing on the bottom that shot the sound straight out. So again, it's going to be mostly just projection. So you can hear more stick attack and you can hear more of what's being played and less of the tone of the drum. Because there won't be much at that point. The sound's just headed straight out. Okay, so I just grabbed the mic again. Sorry. So while we're on this, let's talk about tuning a drum, okay, or at least tuning a tom. Okay, so batter side that you play on, resonant head that gives you tone. Okay, typically this resonant head is a little bit thinner, so do consider that if you're going to play on that one, it's not going to take as much of a beating as the other ones. Okay. And I might as well talk about this while we're here. When you get drums out of the box, you usually have these Remo UX, which is I think short for utility grade. So it's there to hold the parts together while it's being shipped. So if you're going to want to change things, change the drum heads when you get them. Again, at Matt's suggestion, we're going to talk about why upgrading cymbals first rather than upgrading drums. You can change drum heads and dramatically change the sound of your drums. So I'm going to change a floor tom head for you over here in a minute. But these ones they're very, very thin. The resonant side is very thin, and it's just supposed to give you some tone, to give the drum some meat and some extra sort of tonality. It's not meant to be played on. You can, but if you're going to play, do it really, really lightly. But better to just not play on them. Okay, so right now you can hear a kind of papery kind of yuck sound to it. Again, lots of tuning videos out there, lots of guys who got different ways to do it. If I push down on this, I can see all these wrinkles here, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to tighten it so I get rid of those. Anybody else wrinkling? They're pretty good. Okay, so now I want to listen for sort of, does the head sound like it's in tune with itself? This is a tricky one. It's kind of like tuning a guitar with all the strings ringing at once, right? So when you tune, let's say for example you hit this one and you hear different pitches, so to my ear this one sounds like it's a lower pitch. It's entirely possible that this is the one that's loose, not this one, right? So consider going across the drum like this, like we talked about before. So to minimize that, you can put your finger in the middle like this. That one sounds lower to me. Sounds lower. They both do. So I'm going to split the difference. This one feels looser. And what's starting to happen now is there's a more consistent tone that lasts longer. As it's out of tune with itself, you'll hear more of the wub, 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 or the weird overtones, and the sustain won't be as much. So as it starts to ring a bit more, yeah, it sounds like this one's a bit low. Okay, now bear in mind as you raise the pitch on that bottom head, the overall thing, does a drum dial tuner work? Yes, it does, provided your tension rods are well lubricated and so forth like that. If you have an older drum or you haven't taken care of your lugs, it can be questionable. I think it's always a good idea to be able to tune by ear, because if you don't have a drum dial or tuner, then you're still going to have to do it by ear. But it really does depend on sort of the quality of the tension rods that you have, if they're well lubricated, if they're in good shape. And I mean, it's always a good idea to check the sound afterwards anyway, because it's one thing if the numbers say, yes, mathematically it's in tune, and the meter says it's good and in tune, but how does it sound, right? So always check with your ears afterwards. So they're a great tool to have if you need to do something really quickly, like let's say you need to instantly change a drum head and have it more or less where it was. Let's say you're playing a stadium show and you break your 12-inch tom, and the tech guys have to have that head changed before the end of the song. That'd be a great way to do that. But always double check with your ears, right? And again, if the tension is not consistent on your tension rods anyway, let's say you've changed one of them, or there's some metal debris in there, it's going to change the tension, or something's bent, it will give you a reading that says, yes, the tension is consistent here, but not the same kind of thing. All right, so that's a thought. All right, so then what I do typically is I've tuned the bottom head sitting like this. I want to sit it on my leg so I'm not hearing the other head resonate. So it's just that head. So I just heard something I didn't like. There you go. Okay, and then what I'll do when I'm going to tune the top head is I usually put it on the stand, just because that's where I'm going to be playing it, and I will tune it from there. Okay, let's just get that about there. So what I can do then is I can decide, okay, how close it and pitch do I want to have it when I move down. I had this discussion with somebody a little while ago about whether or not you tune them to pitches per se. Like, does this drum need to be an A flat and that one an E flat and so forth like that. I don't know that many guys who do it, and I'm sure there are going to be some people out there who disagree. I think tuning your drums to a specific pitch is a remarkably bad idea, because if your bass player is playing an F and your floor tom is tuned to an E, it's going to sound like blech, right? So better to have it so it's got a bit of fall off to it, or it's not going to be a steady, constant pitch, right? Usually if you've got it tuned a certain way, you'll hit it and it'll start out as an F and then bend down to an E or some kind of thing like that, right? So there's going to be a degree of pitch bend to it. If it's too much a hard A flat and somebody else is playing a different note that doesn't work with that, it can be a thing. Again, I've heard some guys do it and it sounds beautiful if they're playing certain things that work a certain way with the tune, but it's not as common. There we go. And when I start adjusting it this way, it's going to start to speak to me as far as how much it resonates, right? So if it's choked off, something's not tuned correctly, it's somewhere where the shell doesn't want to be, it's going to sound choked off. As soon as I start adjusting that way and the drum starts to go and open up like this, I know I'm heading in the right direction. So I don't know if you can see from the overhead camera, but these are some of those dents that I was talking about. So probably whoever has borrowed this kit has done some playing where they've hit this way with a little bit too much energy and force. So those will affect the ability of your drum to get tuned as well. This right now is it's a single ply head, and we'll talk about single ply and double ply in a second. But typically single ply heads will give you more resonance, more sort of open tone, lots more overtones, just a sort of big, wide sound. Not the worst sound, but can be a little tougher to control. Wrinkles on that one. That one's way too tight. Even a bit more. While we're talking about this too, I mean, there are musical considerations as far as the style of music you're playing that'll affect your tuning. If you're playing a lot of jazz and sort of bebop and kind of stuff like that, typically the tuning is much, much higher. So just for, why not, experiment. So depending on what you're playing, that's going to affect the pitches that you tune. So put a good kind of middle of the road. And again, as I do that, you can hear that it's starting to open up as far as resonance goes. You all hear that? Okay. Most aggravating sound that everybody runs into. It's called sympathetic resonance. And for those of you who didn't take physics in high school, anything at the same pitch as whatever your sound source is will resonate in a room. For example, if you have a tuning fork that's tuned to A440, and you hit anything in the room that is A440 without touching that fork, piano key, the fork will resonate, right? You could have 500 of these tuning forks tuned to A440. You hit the piano key that's A440, everything is going to every one of those forks will resonate. So there's some frequency in this tom that's forcing the bottom head or the top head to resonate as well. It's one of those drum set things that you can't really eradicate because it just is what it is. You can tune them out of range of each other, but then you're going to start to sacrifice the sound of one or the other. Okay, so having that sort of bit of snare buzz is just, again, it gets reduced a little bit by having that split snare that I talked about, but sympathetic resonance is one of those things that makes a drum set sound like a drum set rather than a whole bunch of individual instruments. So you can minimize it a bit by the pitches that you have. That's getting worse. Right, hear that? That's a good one. So if I'm happy with I can put up with that much of it. That's not going to kill me, right? And it kind of gets buried in the performance anyhow. All right, so let's move on to the floor tom. And this is going to be a good time to talk about damping and so forth as well. On here right now, somebody has put some tape in an attempt to suck up some of those overtones that we talked about before. When it comes to overtones, that's one of the reasons why this coating on the snare drum is there, partially for brushes. Since we're talking about brushes, if you don't know what they are, brushes are, where are my brushes? Let's go, let's use these guys, sure. Right. So if you're going to do you won't get this to the same degree that you will get on a coated head, right? So that's what the coating does initially. And then what it also does is it sort of warms the drum up a little bit, cuts out some of those overtones that we're talking about with the single ply coated heads. This will irritate some of you vegans out there, but prior to 1950, almost all drum heads were made with calfskin. And then this material here is called mylar, got developed during World War II. They used to do these reconnaissance flights over whatever enemy territory was, and would put it on celluloid film. And the problem is, while it's sitting in storage, it would start to deteriorate and rot. So the Army said, okay, we need something that's not going to deteriorate when it gets wet, when it sits for a couple of years, or whatever it is. And they developed mylar. And then somebody got the idea to make a drum head out of it, and it was completely impervious to weather, so you could march in the rain if you wanted, and it wasn't going to change your tuning, right? So that's where we are with the mylar stuff. So right now, like I said, on this floor tom, somebody has put some tape to kind of suck up some of the overtones, give it a bit more. That doesn't sound bad. Not bad, okay? This will, again, suck up some of those overtones, but it's gonna, it's tape on your drum heads. So I'm gonna take this one off, and I'm gonna change it out for a 2-ply head, which I will do right here. Okay. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of, oh, this is a G1. It's a single ply. Why not? We'll do a single ply. Sure. Yeah, I really wanted to do a double ply on this one. But so what we mean by double ply heads is there's a second one laminated to this, and it does a lot to sort of suck up a lot of those extra overtones, and it's a lot more durable. So a consideration is if you're a real heavy hitter and you're playing a lot, if you don't mind, yeah. I'll talk to these guys while we're at it. Yeah, think like a G2 kind of thing. If you're a heavy hitter, it's going to take a lot more of a beating and last a little bit longer, right? So the big wide open sound that we have with the single ply heads is great, but it does sort of, it won't last as long. So you'll get these dents, and it'll just wear out a lot more quickly. My producer Matt's going to go and grab us a 2-ply head so we can do that. And again, while we're talking about that kind of thing, hopefully all you guys know what these are. These are called moon gels. These are great, and it does a similar kind of thing to tape, except it doesn't. You can take them off and add them on. So what it's going to do is it's going to suck up a lot of the overtones and extra sort of sounds that you may or may not want out of your drum. So here's wide open 12. Pretty immediately. You can the best part about these is you can move them around and adjust how much damping you want. If I put more on, I get more on like that. What it does do is it adds mass to the drum head, right? And it makes it move a little slowly. So it's going to drop the pitch a bit. Ah, lovely. Perfect. Emperor's fine. Yep. Cool. Excellent. So, and you get that cool little rainbow effect with these ones. And it's just from the 2 layers of Mylar sitting together. So we were just talking about moon gels while you're out. So in case you were missing that. So yeah, you can use these to sort of suck up some of the overtones rather than putting tape on your drum heads. But these things are great that way. And again, depending on where you put it on the drum head, it's going to affect the sound a little bit. If I do this sometimes where I'm just setting it kind of just like that. A little bit if I still want some of the edge sound, I can move it in here. Right? Really cuts down the sustain and really gets rid of those overtones. So the more I add. All right, since we're experimenting, why not let's see what happens when we add more and more of them. Okay. There we go. This guy's here. And you can hear that we're starting to lose a lot of the sustain. The sound's a lot more focused and a lot fewer overtones going on there. What's your take on hydraulic heads? That's an excellent question. For anybody who doesn't know what a hydraulic head is it's one of these 2-ply heads, and in between there's a thin layer of oil. And that will pretty much eradicate every single overtone you could possibly imagine. And it gives it some more durability too. So like I said, if you're one of these really heavy hitters, you're going to get a lot of wear out of it, and it'll last a lot longer. The trade-off is it's not going to resonate as much, it won't project as much, you get a lot more stick sound, but there won't be as much sort of tonality to it. I think they're great for certain situations. Lots of recordings that you hear have those heads on them. Again, anything from like the late 70s up until probably the early part of the 80s, there were a lot of studio recordings that were using hydraulic heads just because it was such a focused, tight sound, right? As people got using noise gates more, they'd use them less. Okay, so there we go. Here's our 12-inch tom with 4 moon gels on it. And you can hear the difference in tonality. So let's just, again, go from here. So you're starting to open up a little bit more. And finally, back to the original. Okay, so great thing. They're not very expensive. To clean them, you just need a little bit of soap and water, because they'll pick up lint and all kinds of things that's around in your area. If your practice area is dusty, they will start to look pretty gross pretty quickly. But yeah, moon gel, super cheap. I usually keep them in my stick bag. Great stuff to have around. All right, so let's talk about this, this single ply head. So remember, let's do this. Let's take this off of here. 1, 2, and 3. Oh my gosh. Here's another reason why I do not put tape on your drum heads. Ugh. Those sticky, goopy nose. While we're talking about different kinds of drum heads, depending on which drum head company you're talking about, there are a lot of products that sort of emulate calf skin, some that are made out of Kevlar. They're going to have different sounds and different sort of durabilities, and they're going to sound pretty different when you hit them too. So just do some shopping around. So here's our So that's our wide open floor tom with the single ply head on it. So when you're changing heads like we did with the bass drum, try and go across the drum as much as you can. Not so much of a problem on floor toms and toms like that are not as tight, but if you are not careful, tightening down one side too much can actually misshape your rim. So And when I get this off of here, it's got this nice little dish in the middle that I can see. And I'll show you what that means in a second. Okay. So when I'm talking about dishing, if the head has been on there for a while, it's been played really hard and tuned pretty tightly. Snare drums are great for this. You get this sort of dip in the middle like that. And it makes it a little tougher to get the kind of sound that you want. I've spoken to this one jazz drummer, hasn't changed his drum heads in 30 years. He loves the way they sound. They got all the bar gunk on them and whatever else like that, and it doesn't play hard enough that they're going to dish out. So, but for me, I like changing my heads a little more often than that because they really sound a lot better. Okay, here like this. Okay, if you don't want to have, let's say for example you've got one tension rod that's got a metal spur on it or something, and it's stripping out one of the inserts. And again, I'm not sure if we can see. So the inserts are these little parts right there. Can you see it on that camera there, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So these inserts here. So it's possible to strip those out. If you've got one tension rod that's wrecking that insert, rather than move this tension rod around to all of them and wreck all the inserts, keep it like this. Drop the head on. And again, Matt would like me to make sure that my logo and my logo on my shell and my logo on my head line up with each other, because that's how he likes it to be. Not that it matters, but for some people it does. He and I were discussing before we started how I like to have my drum heads facing a certain direction when I'm playing, so I'll often put the head on, figure out where it's going to sit, and adjust it that way. Because having logos facing weird directions for some people is a real thing and a distraction. So I'm just going to drop all these in here, and again, we'll finger tighten them down first. Okay. Oops. Again, if you're going to change heads, a good time to do any kind of lug lubrication is at this point, right? You can, like I said, you can use some kind of heavier grease like lithium grease, or you can use Vaseline or something that's got a bit more weight to it, so that they don't vibrate out with lower frequencies as you play. Okay, and there we go. And so those are all about as tight as I'm going to get them with my fingers. That way, this way, and that way. Okay. So just like we did on the other drum, I'm going to push down here, and you'll see a whole bunch of wrinkles happening around the head like this. So a good way to start is to just take that and 1, 2, 1, 2. That's about there. And I'm kind of going by feel at this point. So to the gentleman's question, I think it was Gregory was asking about drum dials. This is probably not a good place to get, not a bad place to get started with the drum dial, just to get it in the ballpark, and then from there, use your ears. But what I'm trying to do is get it so that the wrinkles start to go away. Right? And again, I'm going to try and go across the drum as much as I can, so I'm keeping the tension consistent. And you can hear this cracking that's happening. So what I'm going to do right before I get too much further along. Okay, I don't know if you can hear all that cracking that goes on. That's the head being what's called seated, right? So there's glue sitting inside of, way back when these were made out of flesh. This is called the flesh hoop, okay, the aluminum part. So this part, the film sits inside of that, and there's a lot of glue that holds it in there, right? So what we're doing is we're just kind of cracking the glue and make sure that this stuff is not going to, change tuning too dramatically as we go, okay? So, and that'll, sort of settle in. I'm going to check it again. See if I got some more wrinkles now. Show it up. There, there. Definitely one here. And here. Cool. And shouldn't be too bad. Not bad. I can hear a little bit of vroom. So now I'm going to go around and check and see. That one sounds like it's a little floppy. And as I do this, the drum's going to start talking to me about how much resonance I'm hearing and how much it's starting to open up. Less of that papery kind of waffle happening. And again, because it's a 2-ply head, it won't have as much of the overtones popping out of it. If you feel at this point like you want to add some of that moon gel to it, you can. If not, so let's be scientific about this. I'm going to take a couple more of these. These also come in blue. Those are the ones you're typically used to seeing. I don't hate the clear ones. They're kind of cool that way. So here we go. And let's go with this. Okay, there we go. So pretty dramatic tonal difference between a single ply head and a 2-ply head with some muffling on it, right? Once again, consider your musical preferences, your musical needs. If there's a particular sound you're going for, go for that. By this point in our drum set evolution, we probably don't need to talk about this, but I'm going to anyway, is that when you're hearing sounds on your favorite recordings, if it's the last 20 years, it's probably not an actual drum anyway, or if it is, it's been processed like crazy. There are noise gates, EQs, samples, sound replacement, all kinds of things like that that are going to change the sound of the drum that you're hearing. So if you're trying to get that sound that you heard on your favorite recording, know that there's been an awful lot of electronic intervention in getting the sound. So get a sound that you're happy with, that you like the sound of, right? That's really sort of the bottom line. So for me right now, this is a fun sound to play. Again, same situation with my floor tom. I sometimes tip it away from me with the same angle that I do with my snare drum. Or if I'm over here, I'm pretty okay with that kind of angle, right? I don't want to have it too far up in the air. I don't want to have it way down low, because then I'm going to end up hitting it with this kind of downward angle and putting a terrible dent in there. Cool. So we started talking about cymbals and why to set them up so that you don't crack and break them like that. What I want to talk about now is the sort of, oh, we got a question? Any advice setting up a kit for a 3-foot tall? Yeah, so they can reach the pedals. Yeah, so find a seat height that's good for them. Hopefully the hardware that you have, so the snare stand goes low enough. I know in a lot of cases we don't get that kind of choice because you've either gotten the drums off a friend or you got them online and so forth. But as he gets lower, so let's say for example I'm 3 foot 4 inches tall, I'm going to have my snare drum setting kind of this sort of angle up here as it goes up, right? So remember, out of the belly button, kind of a wave. You're going to end up angling the drums more this way. For the toms, depending on how deep they are, you might want to angle them in this way like that kind of thing, right? And this will help also to give him some way to do that. Just so that he can reach stuff, really, or she can reach stuff. I don't know if he or she is 3, 4, 4, but so that they can reach stuff, don't have them spread too far apart. It's going to seem kind of cramped, like if you sit down and you're feeling like you're sitting at the little kid's desk, then great. What we got? Mark, the problem with the tuning pegs closest to me coming loose in the floor tom and snare. Stop that from happening. Okay, so there was a product, they have them, they don't have them, they have them, they don't have them. It's called lug lock. And what it is it's just a little piece of nylon or plastic that sits over top of it this way, and it stops it from kind of doing this. The reason why that's happening is you're hitting the drum like this, and usually it's at that point that the rim is going to flex a little bit more there than anywhere else. As it flexes, it takes tension off of that tension rod, right? So it's allowed to vibrate. So imagine you're doing this, and that vibrates a bit this way, and it comes back up, and you hit it again, and it vibrates a bit this way, okay? So some kind of block on there would be helpful. If you use, again, I don't know if you can see on the side on these ones, but these are nylon bushings. They do a little bit less of that than the metal ones do. The metal washers don't, and I don't think many people still use them anymore. If you've got an older drum, you might have metal washers on here. But the nylon washers are a little bit better for that kind of thing. and again, a lot of it has to do with hitting it directly on where the lugs are. So the kind of hoops that you have might affect that. We didn't talk about it, but there are two different kinds of hoops you can have. You can have these flanged hoops, which is all a flange means is that they bent the hoop in a couple of different directions. On some drums these days, and definitely in days of yore, they had these straight hoops like this. So the tension rods would go down, and you just had the straight piece of metal like this. But what tears sticks apart. So now they bent them back this way and bent them out that way. So it's called a triple flanged hoop. So you got 1, 2, 3, so 3 bends in it. You can also have what are called die cast hoops, and those are, as you would imagine, just one solid piece of cast metal. From my experience, those tend to move a little more uniformly, so it's a great sound, but if I'm going to spin out lugs, it's going to be like 3 of them at a time. With the flanged hoops, not as much, but yeah, if you're hitting it right there, it flexes down, and the lug is allowed to spin a little bit that way. And again, the way to prevent that, if you can, is to find these little pieces of plastic or nylon. They're about probably that thick, and it'll have a hole so you can put it on top of the lug, and that helps a fair bit for that. I'm not sure if there's some DIY you could do that with, but definitely those plastic lug lock things, I think the product it's called, will help that. If you don't mind, I'm just going to get some water because I'm feeling a little on the dry side. Excuse me. Cool. We were about to talk about cymbals. So they're made out of a few different things. Predominantly, most of the cymbals that you're going to run into, if they're any kind of quality, are what are called B20 bronze or bell metal bronze. And the 20 comes from the amount of tin content. So it's copper and tin smelted together, right? So those two metals by themselves, both copper and tin, are pretty flexible, right? Once you smelt them together, they become like much, much stronger, much harder. The more tin content you have, usually the more musical kind of sound you have. So again, the higher quality ones like this are going to have B20 bronze or B20 bronze, bell bronze. You can have B8 bronze, which is only 8% tin, right? Which is one of these guys right here. So it's a little more red, of course, because there's more copper and less tin, right? So when you can see the two of those together like that, a little more orangey kind of color. And it's a sound preference thing. Different companies will do different situations with them. But it's usually a little more musical sound out of these. Right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to contrast two ride cymbals because that's a little more fair comparison. So we're going to take this one, which is, again, B20 bronze. And this is kind of pretty standard metal on this one. It's a medium ride, so medium thickness, medium kind of sound. And okay. And I'm going to contrast that with this. It's a lot more sort of top end, more high pingy kind of sound. They were calling these Eurocast cymbals for a while. So depending on the company, a company like Peisty has, I think the 2002s are probably this kind of thing. So the process that they go through to get, so here, well, the three we've got HH, which is short for hand hammered. You got AA, which is a machine hammered kind of thing. And this, whether it's Sabian, Zildjian, or different companies, that's usually the thing. There's some degree of hammering that goes into shaping a cymbal, right? So you can see the very, even uniform versions of it here that's been hammered by a machine. And this is some dude with a ball peen hammer listening to each hit that he makes, right? So there are going to be different tonal qualities to each one. Again, to my ears, B20, and I think most people, is a little more musical sound. If you get something to really project, though, like to really cut through, and you're playing louder music, maybe B8 bronze is the way to go. The last one is brass. And as you can tell immediately by the color, made of a different material, and it's lathed, right? So there's some hammering that goes in here, but these are lathed, and the sound in these is like it's workable, right? But not quite as musical a sound as these ones here. Beautiful, rich cascade of colors. Not quite as rich, not quite as cascadey. Some sort of budget drum kits come with cymbals, and those are typically made out of brass and they're very, very thin. So I've seen a few drum kits set up where the edges of it look like this, and the cymbal's been beaten to smithereens, and they don't typically sound all that great. So if there's something that you want to upgrade on your kit, start with the cymbals. Okay. What we talked about with changing tuning, changing muffling, and all that kind of stuff with drums, you have a lot of different ways that you can change the sound of your drums, adapt them to different musical situations. Cymbals, a little bit less so, right? So you can do, maybe if you decide you want to, which I don't recommend you doing by yourself, but if you're handy, you can sometimes drill cymbals to get a little bit darker sound. Again, really don't recommend that you do it, but if you must. The other thing that I can do if I want to is I can take these moon gels, and if I want to really dry up the sound of that cymbal, like if I want one of those really dark kind of stick definition-y kind of cymbals, I can take these bad boys and use them on a cymbal. I had a recording engineer one time freak out and said, "What, you can use those on cymbals?" I'm like, "You absolutely can." So here we got. So you can totally use those kinds of things on cymbals, but there really isn't too much you can do to change the sound of it, at least not as dramatically as you can with drums. And again, you have a wide range of sounds that you can choose from with cymbals, and you can keep collecting them and keep collecting them over the course of years. If your tastes change, then you can change your cymbals out. But if you get a really good quality cymbal, there's no reason why you can't keep that for the rest of your life, right? And that's usually why if you've got a drum kit that you've got, off a friend, or you've got a starter kit, and you need to upgrade something because you're not happy with the sound anymore, start with the cymbals, right? Usually a better place to go because, again, you can do so much with the drums to change the sounds of them, right? And tuning and so forth. Quick little story: the first drum kit that I had, and bless my mom for doing it because she really struggled to get it. The drums were really not that good. They were, I think she paid maybe $75, which was a lot, but $75 for them, and it had a snare, a high tom, and a bass drum, and one cymbal off the side. That's it. Right. So what I did is I spent a lot of time learning how to make things sound better, tuning, muffling, damping, changing. I took the covering off them at one point. I sanded them down. Learned what a bearing edge was, which is just the edge where the drum sits. And just spent a lot of time cobbling together different pieces to make it sound good. So when I got a good quality drum set, all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh. But there was a degree of fiddling around with things and trying sounds, trying all sorts of things to get a sound that I was happy with. Okay, so we talked about hand hammered, we talked about the machine hammered, we talked about B20 bronze and B8 bronze and brass and so forth like that. What a lot of you might be seeing these days are these practice cymbals, and they're not made out of either. And they're kind of cool because this particular one is made by Zildjian. It's called an LV80. And I was always wondering, what does the 80 mean? The 80 means 80 decibels, and that's all you're going to get, no matter how hard you hit it. And I had a little VU meter that I tried this out with, and I beat the crap out of it, and the best I could get was 78 dB. So. Compared to okay, so pretty remarkable difference. And just because of all these little holes here, it's going to spread the sound out, and there's not going to be as much mass vibrating at the same time, because this has got tons and tons of little overtones and different kind of frequencies talking to each other. This interrupts that, right? So the frequency or the overtones travel through and hit a hole, and there you go. So they make those for ride cymbals and hi-hats and so forth. Sabian makes them, Zildjian makes them. I'm sure the longer we stay on lockdown, more people will make them out of different things. We can get on to effects cymbals. And so similar to the idea of reducing mass on stuff, you've probably seen a few of these around with the holes in them like this. And these are great. When I found these, because what I used to play a lot of were these China cymbals or Chinese cymbals, and I don't have one here, but they're those ones that look like they're kind of flipped inside out or the edge is tipped down, and you get this really dark, trashy, brash sound. But usually they're so loud they'll rip your head off. So these, similar kind of sound, but way quieter. This is a sound that, and I forget the drummer, it might have been Denny Fongheiser, I'm not sure, but if you've heard that, that Steve Miller Band tune, that sound was all over the place. What he did to get that sound was he had a regular cymbal, cut it in half, took half the mass of the cymbal off, right? So as you do that, it's going to darken up and trash the sound up. Really, really kind of cool sound. Also, you have splash cymbals. I love these. Little kind of thing like this. These have gotten out of vogue a couple of times over the decades. So sometimes they're really cool to have. If you have people like Stuart Copeland and Manu Katché and guys like that playing them, then everybody wants to play them. Dave Weckl was playing lots of splash cymbals at one point. And then cymbals started getting bigger and guys didn't like them so much, and they go in and out of fashion. But I kind of like them because it's a different color. So smaller kind of thing. Again, make sure your cymbals are not on too tight, especially with splash cymbals because they will break. Okay, there you go. Okay, and they can be, you know, right? Not going to be as much sustain. I'm not sure what the sort of dividing line is between crash and splash. So 8, 10, 12, probably 13, maybe 14-inch cymbals. Once it gets past that, I'm going to start calling it a crash. But yeah. They come in different sizes, and they're fun little things to add to your colors. Back again to the sound considerations. If you're going to be playing really, really loud, don't expect your splash cymbal is going to cut through a wall of guitars, right? So if it's the kind of sound that you like, consider how loud you're going to be playing and whether or not to bring it out. I've seen way too many of these things just practically fall off the stand because they've been cracked. Some dude trying to get at the sound, you know, like this, and you know, a guitar player gets in the room and it sounds like this. And that's all you hear out of it. It's just this click just before it takes its final breath. Okay? I want to talk a little bit about drumsticks and the choices that you make with those, because for all the things that we've been talking about as far as comfort, damage to your gear, sounds, all that, your drumsticks do affect that. And I'm not sure how many of you know what the designations on sticks are, but just about every company has a 7A, a 5A, a 5B, a 2B, and a 1S, and so forth like that. So a quick breakdown of that. The sticks that have an A at the end were for orchestra, right? What that meant for, like way back when, was if you were playing sort of quieter things or you're playing in a quieter band, you would have an A stick, right? The B was for band, big band, right? So swing bands and so forth like that, bigger, thicker stick. And then S was for street. Okay, so street sticks, parade sticks, big, huge, chunky sticks like that. So I'm going to haul out some stuff here. I'm going to talk about that very briefly. So, where's my 5A? Oh, over there. So, pretty common is a 5A stick. Okay, so the A, of course, would be for orchestra. When it comes to the numbers, the lower the number, the thinner the stick. So the smallest one that you're likely to get with those kinds of designations is going to be a 7A. So 7A is the shortest stick and the thinnest one. Usually if you're a beginner and you're this tall, I usually suggest starting with 7As or that kind of thing, right? Unless you're like really, really teeny and they've got some kid sticks. But 7As are very, very light, thinner. We'll talk about the materials that they're made out of in a second. But so 7A, biggest number, and A is for your orchestra. As you head further on up, you get into these parade sticks, which are like an S kind of thing here. So these big, giant, honking, they're just for comparison's sake, there you go. That's the kind of size difference we're talking about. You wouldn't use this for a jazz gig if you wanted to keep your jazz gig, right? But more sort of street. Obviously, the amount of mass you have in the stick is going to affect the sound, so that's something to consider. So pretty commonly, the most common ones I've seen as far as standardized ones are going to be 7A, 5A, 5B, 2B, and maybe 1S stick. As you go to different drumstick manufacturers, you're going to get variations in whatever their catalog is. So they'll make like a 6A, but it won't be the same as somebody else's 6A, or 77 5B, or whatever it is. There'll be some variation there. There's one stick company that was making them based on their endorser's area code or zip code, kind of thing like that. So like a 747 was, somebody's, postal code or some kind of thing like that. So you really do have to do a lot of looking around and trying things out. When it comes to selecting what stick to use, make the consideration for how loud you're going to be playing and your technique before you start, going too crazy with buying a whole bunch of sticks. I've found over the years that as I use heavier sticks, I kind of like the way that that the stick does the work for me. Where's my 5B? So, what I'm looking for. So this is a 2B hickory. Let's do. Yeah, there we go. 5B. So this is a 5B hickory. So the kinds of woods you're typically going to run into are going to be hickory, maple. Some people make oak, but hickory and maple are two of the more common ones. Hickory is more flexible to a degree, right? So, and it'll take a lot more of a beating. So if you were looking for rock sticks or sticks that are going to last a little longer, what'll happen with a 5B as you dig into it a lot more is it'll start to flake off a little bit more in the middle, right? The maple is technically harder, but it's less flexible, right? So a good sort of example of that would be something like glass versus plastic, right? So glass is definitely harder than plastic, but it's not anywhere near as flexible. So with maple sticks, you can have the same size stick, but it won't, you lay into a cymbal or a snare drum really hard, it won't flex as much. I've made that mistake a couple of times where I bring my 5B maples to the gig, and we ended up playing really loud, and I ended up popping through 3 of them, and I never break sticks. So I popped through 3 of them in the same night because I made the wrong choice for what I was doing. So for durability, 5B hickory, again, it's a little more dense, but it'll take a bit more of a beating. Or if you really got to get down to business, you can use a 2B hickory. That's a huge stick. And as you get to the thinner ones, so this is a 5A, and we'll see how this translates to whatever speakers you're listening to. But there's a difference in how these things are going to sound on your cymbals and on your drums. So I've got 5A, 5B. Where's my 2B? Where is it? Or not 2B? Ugh, gross. And I've got this here. So this is an 8A. So this is another one that's sort of common, but kind of jazzier stick. Little tiny beat on it like this. I'll talk about tips in a minute. Okay. So just all those ones on the same drum. Here's what we got. So we'll start at the bottom. We'll start with the 8A. And move up to a 5A. A lot of it's how it feels for me, but I can sort of feel up here at least a little bit more weight to it. I'm going to go to a 5B hickory. So finally a 2B, which is the biggest ones are the ones I got. And what I'm feeling is just this big, wide sort of change in the amount of resonance out of the drum. So again, tip things aside for the moment. We're going to start with the 8A on the cymbal. Five A. Five B. A bit darker, and then this one. Okay. And just to underscore that kind of point, if I haul out one of these parade sticks, okay, with the big giant tip on it, Okay, so there's a lot of difference to be made when it comes to choosing your drumsticks, right? If you are going to play really loud and really hard and you want a big, huge, fat sound, little skinny stick with a tiny tip like this, maybe not the way to go. Okay? And what you'll inevitably end up doing probably is playing harder to hear yourself heard. You already know how that's going to go. So consider what it is that you're trying to play, how loud you want it to sound. As far as the tips go, you have little tiny tips like this. Again, a lot of jazz sticks will have this because the sound is very pointed. Yep. You hear a lot more stick definition and so forth like that. So that's called a ball tip. You have a acorn tip like this. Again, that's on a bigger, heavier stick. You've got smaller acorn tip. And teardrop tips. So it's like a little pointed kind of thing here. So they're going to have different sounds on your cymbals. Go to your drum store and try them out.
Hold them up while get
Sure. Okay. So here's our ball tip. Okay. You've got teardrop. Kind of looks like a teardrop, right? You've got and these two acorn tips. Okay. So and here's a good sort of thing we were talking about before with the 5B and the 5A. So they're about the same length, but you can see there's a little more meat in this stick versus that one, right? And they're both hickory. So there's a lot of considerations to make that way. And I've seen lots of people with really skinny sticks trying to sort of lay into their drums and get all the sound out. If I can, and we weren't supposed to talk a lot about technique today, but I'm gonna because number one, it's important to me. And number two, it's gonna save a lot of problems for you down the road. Let your sticks do your work for you, okay? Don't, I mean, you can do what you want. Don't try and force through things when you can let physics take care of it for you. When it comes to gripping your sticks, I don't even like the word grip because this sort of implies this. Yep. Oh, we have a question. When you're playing hard, how do you avoid throwing sticks? My hands get pretty sweaty. Okay, so I was talking about that just before we were doing it here. It's going to depend on the pH in your sticks and the kind of grip that you have on the sticks. I use, oh my gosh, it's going to sound like a moisturizing commercial, but I try to make sure my hands are at least relatively moist because the stick will stick to it a bit more. If I have dry hands, this would be a juggling act up here. So some people use gloves. There are some stick dip things that you can use, tape wrap and so forth like that. And part of it is going to be the size of the sticks that you use. For example, if you got like this big meaty paw and you're trying to use a 7/8 stick, you're going to be squeezing a lot more so that thing doesn't go flying, right? So for me, I like using bigger sticks, for example, like even these 2Bs, because my hand is nice and relaxed, I can get lots of sound out and I don't have to squeeze it. So ironically enough, if I'm really squeezing the stick, I'm more likely to do something like sweat and have it slip out of my hand. So just very quickly, if I can talk about grip stuff, different things for different purposes, right? I'm not sure, probably this one over here, Matt. And here, let's do this. Actually, do you know what? If we can take a second, I'm going to use that one with the practice head on so I can talk over top of it. Is that okay? Okay, just 1 second. Here. I'm just going to switch out things so I can talk to you guys and not burn Matt's headphones off. Okay. So if you ever want to get people riled up, especially drummers, start talking about grip. For whatever reason, this is just one of those things everybody wants to get upset about. So I want to use the least amount of effort I can to get the stick to move. If I'm playing really quietly, so where to start? So I want to make sure the stick is more or less in the middle of my arm. Okay, so I got a straight line coming from my elbow to this tip of the stick, right? I'm just kind of drop hinging. I'm not really doing much of anything. If I'm up, yep.
I think we lost that camera.
Oh, sounds like.
It looks like it's frozen.
Oh, I did hear a click.
Keep going.
Okay, so from the front, here, let's see if we can, Matt's going to do some technical wizardry for me. And in the meantime, I'll see if I can get this, this kind of shown from the front. What I'm doing is I got the stick sitting sort of in the middle of my hand this way, right? And I'm dropping straight down like this, because while I'm up here, if I relax my wrist, I don't have to do anything, right? It goes just straight down like this, right? And it's going to come up to a degree as well, right? So I don't have to do very much with this. I want to make sure that my fingers are still attached to the stick, not squeezing it, but attached to the stick, right? Because if I have to go, then I can still get that happening, okay? And I'm not really forcing the stick down. I'm not really picking it up. I'm just sort of staying out of the way of the stick and letting it do its thing. If I'm playing really, really quietly, I'll change the focus of this to this. Now, I'm not going to pull my other fingers off because the stick will go flying. But the focus is less here and more here, right? So this gives me sort of a lot of flexibility this way. Right? And if I really, really need to hit something really hard, what I'll do, rather than doing this, and I see lots of guys do this, this is a surefire recipe to do two things. First of all, break your stick, and secondly, your thumb joints are going to be really unhappy about it, like doing this kind of business. So rather than do that, is I'll grab the stick with these back two fingers, like this. And I can absolutely wail on a drum this way. And what's happening is as I hit it, it's popping up into here. If I need to change back to something that does this, it's all right there. So without changing the position of my hand on the stick and doing this and sliding down, sliding backwards and forwards, I've just changed the focus of it here to there, right? And I'm letting the stick do the work. And again, if it's a big meaty 2B stick, I don't have to do anything. I've got all this mass moving around that I just have to control the direction of, right? And this is this kind of thing saves a lot of damage to your head, your sticks, your body, right? Because I'm allowing all this force to come back this way a little bit, right? If I do this, and everybody knows Newton's third law about for every action, equal opposite reaction, all this energy that you've thrown down here, however many pounds per square inch that is, or what have you, kilojoules, all that isn't turned into sound is getting shot back into a stick. So if it's not being absorbed by the drum head, it either goes into my thumb or the stick just can't take enough of it, right? Like this. That many hits and I can only feel it in the tip of my thumb, right? And to say nothing of my knuckles. And I'm sure some of you out there have gone through some kind of joint problems or issues like that. I see guys all the time playing with the tensor bandages on, right? It's a lot of muscle tension and you're going to hurt yourself, right? There's no way of getting around that. If you're playing really hard and gripping the stick like this, never mind the fact that you're going to break stuff and you're going to get in the way of your own speed and power, right? Drums sound better when you do that. Let's do that. I'll use that drum right there. Okay. So here's. Okay. So it's maybe not as dramatic in your headphones if you're listening on your phone, whatever, but there's a big difference in the amount of resonance that's coming out of that drum just from doing that. So I'm laying into it. There's a lot going in there, but because it's kind of choking, right? I can put a lot of force into that and not really do. I could do that all day because I'm not forcing this way. So try to develop your technique so that you're doing the least amount of force on whatever it is you're doing and the most amount of just sort of working with the stick and working with all this physics that's happening with you. Let's see if the question and message board lights up after I say this. But this is the one hill that I've decided I will die on, is practicing on pillows. Please, for the love of Pete, don't do it. And here's why. What typically happens with pillow practice is the stick will do this kind of thing and stay there, right? Doesn't come back at you, right? Stick doesn't bounce no matter what I do. So in order to get that stick up faster, what I have to do is lift it, right? One of the selling features of this is supposed to be it helps to strengthen your wrists. Well, it strengthens it coming up this way, but I don't really need to get the stick up that way when it's going to come up anyhow, right? If there's some way that somebody's got that's going to strengthen the downstroke, which is where I'm actually looking for stuff to be stronger and faster, that's great. This way, I don't really need to have it come up faster or stronger or any kind of thing like that. And I think the trade-off is that you tighten this part of your grip, which is a lot of you know is called your fulcrum. So as I tighten that, right, now the stick's not going to move as freely. So better to use a practice pad, something that's going to rebound, and learn to control that. Okay, and you don't need to do this, right? Right, but just using your wrist and letting it fall into the drum. And I'm going to do this on a proper snare drum in a second. Let's put this aside. So camera 3 is dead. It's toast.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So I'm just going to leave that 10-inch tom off there then. Okay, so right. Lots of sound coming out, and I'm trying to stay as relaxed as possible so that I'm getting the most that the drum will give me. I'm not putting extra force on the stick. I'm not, pressing into the head, and I'm not pressing into things, right? Any kind of muscle tension is going to slow you down, first of all, because you have to release that muscle. And secondly, you're choking off the sound of what could come out of it. I've had to play lots and lots of gigs that were really, really loud with a lot of stuff going on, and my hands didn't get tired. My cardio was terrible, but my hands didn't get tired because I didn't force this way. I didn't squeeze into it. So when I see pictures of guys who've got these calluses that are all peeled off and blisters on their hands and blood and so forth, I cringe. So your technique is going to be important to your playing longevity, first of all. And this is one thing that's really important to me, is making sure that if you're going to start playing the drums now, I want you playing when you're 95. Right? I want you to be able to play and enjoy this for the rest of your life, rather than saying, well, I used to be able to play, but my joints gave out and so forth. There's no reason for that to happen. At least not directly from playing, right? If you've got other underlying issues, I get it. But try to make sure that you're not cutting your own career short by doing this kind of thing. And again, the sound that you're going to get is better. You're not going to break as many sticks. You're definitely not going to break cymbals if you're careful about how you set them up, right? If Dave's still watching, he's going to get me on this one, but my personal opinion is that you have no reason to break cymbals, right? You shouldn't be doing it. Some of those effect cymbals, like the one we have with the hole in it, they're a little more flexible and might rip, but breaking ride cymbals and crash cymbals, not a fan, especially if you can, watch your ears. Okay, very quickly, on the cymbals, I'm coming off this way. I'm coming off sideways, right? I don't want to chop in it like this. But I get lots of sound out that way, and I don't need to bash at it. So,
Do it one more time.
Sure. Here we go. Okay. Cool. So it's kind of sliding off. I don't need to scoop at it like I'm doing this kind of thing, but coming this way and glancing off it, that the cymbal can take. This, not so much. Okay. And again, I don't want to break things. I don't want to. I don't want my body hurting. I don't want to wreck sticks. But this is sort of for me why I'm so much on people's cases about their technique and so forth. One of the things that is tough to do is to change something you've been doing for a very long time. And this is kind of going to tie into the setup issue as well. When you're setting up, you want to make sure that you are comfortable, right? Not used to something. Not this is how I've been doing it for a long time. Just get accustomed to something that's comfortable, and the change will be dramatic. If you look at the angle, I've got this ride cymbal set up right here. Right. Okay, and hopefully you can see it from that side here. But I'm not doing this. I'm not reaching across a bunch of stuff. If you want to play, your cymbals way up in the air, what you're going to have to do is start changing the angle that they sit at. So hopefully some of you guys know who Ndugu Chancellor was. Played for Michael Jackson and just about everybody who was famous. He used to play his cymbals way up in the air like that, but he didn't have them set up at this angle. Watch this. So what he would do is tilt them down like this. Okay. So now, my elbow and my shoulder are still hanging pretty much where they were before. I can even take it higher if I want and flatten it out even more. Let's see how much higher that stand goes. Right? So this seems crazy to a lot of us, but so I'm pretty much sitting at the same angle I was before. My elbow was hanging down, my shoulders relaxed. But because of where the cymbal's sitting now, I have to change the angle of it. If I didn't do that, I'd be sitting with this. Right. Okay, so you can adjust your cymbal heights as much as you like, but make sure that you're taking into consideration that idea we talked about before with the angle and so forth, right? And also, I mean, as it gets more like this, you're putting more of that angle on the stick, right? So if you're popping sticks a lot this way, possibly that you're hitting it at a weird angle. Yep, sorry. What about nylon tips? Any advice? Yeah, if you like. For me, they're a bit too clicky, but that's one of those sound choices you can consider. If the tips are likely to break off, and they do, I mean, it's a small lathe tip like this. You play it enough times and things are going to start to flake off. It won't sound as bright and crisp. So if you need to have that really sharp cymbal sound all the time, the nylon tips are not a bad thing. I'm not a fan of how they sound, but that's my own personal thing. As for durability, they're going to last a lot longer on the tip part of it, right? The rest of the shaft of the stick is what it is. But yeah, so nylon tips if you want to keep the sound bright and you don't want the tips to wear down too quickly, right? And I think most stick companies make whatever stick they make, so if they got a 5B, they probably have a 5B nylon. If they have a 2B, they probably got a 2B nylon. Yeah, so that's another sound considered, and that's based on taste, right? So not likely to do much more damage or really change too much other than the pingy sound if you go for that. Very quickly, I mean, we can explore the different sounds you have inside your cymbals too, right? One thing that I sort of did leave out while we were talking about cymbals is sort of the thickness and the kind of projection that you get out of them. So the thinner the cymbal, you're going to have more of this kind of washy sound. Right? And the more that you have a thicker cymbal, a kind of ping. Over the course of the years, again, depending on drum fashion, they've gone for some really thick, heavy ride cymbals that just go tick, practically. So there's tons of stick definition, but not very much wash. To bigger cymbals that are very, very washy and kind of wide sounding. So it's again, make the consideration based on what are your musical choices and so forth like that. Bells are a big one for me. When I'm cymbal shopping, if I'm looking around for stuff, I usually try and find a ride cymbal that I can crash on, and sometimes crash cymbals that don't sound terrible as quiet ride cymbals, right? So let's say you've got a 19-inch cymbal that, you know, it sounds like this big killer crash, but if I needed to, on a quiet jazz gig, I could put that up on the stand, maybe put a piece of tape on it, and I got a nice quiet ride cymbal. For this is not bad, because I feel like I could, if I wanted. And it's a reasonable crash sound, right? It's not going to go clank, and I'm not going to rip anybody's head off with the sound of it. And likewise with this, it's a nice thin sound, right? If I were playing, I can change the angle I'm hitting it, and it's going to still give it some musical sound, right? So there are a lot of things to consider when you're shopping for cymbals. What are your thoughts on hot rods? Oh, my goodness, I can't believe I forgot that. Thanks, Chris. Different things to hit your drums with. And I can't believe I don't have my wire brushes here. But hot rods. So lots of different companies have their own versions of that. These ones are bamboo, right? If you're going to be playing anywhere near a country band, anywhere in the world, you need to have these, period. Because somebody's going to ask you for them, right? Nope. But they don't just have to be for that, right? If you're going to do... The idea of these was sort of to be in between a stick and a brush, right? So if I want to play this, right? But the restaurant manager's like... I can play with about the same intensity, and it's going to diffuse the sound as it hits, right? And it still allows me to do a lot of the same things I would do with sticks, and not quite as much snap. Oh, I do have my wire brushes. So, wire brushes. Here we go. And yeah. So we've got the wire brushes, and I pulled them out earlier. I don't know if you were all tuned into that. Nylon brushes. Okay, so the sound's going to be a bit different on those. So here, let's compare and contrast. So we've got the hot rods, wham rods, blast stick, like slap stick, all kinds of different companies and they'll call them something different. The original thing of these was a bunch of, like 1/8" dowel from the hardware store with some tape on it. So, to the, a little more flexible. To the sadly, unless you're playing jazz, brushes seem to be getting out of common usage. I think that if you're going to have any kind of well-rounded career playing drums and making money at it, learn how to use brushes. Even the basics, right? Just switch patterns. Because it'll show up. And there's no reason why you can't use these playing other styles of music, right? Some more sort of sounds and things like that. But yeah, I think these are a great idea. I've got these ones that are made out of bamboo, and I've got another pair that are made out of maple, like the more sort of common versions of that. So here we go. So let's do that. So as the binding material, so whether it's tape or whatever it is you have on it, gets closer to the tip, they're going to sound a little bit more like sticks. So here's these guys. These are a little bit further down at the moment, so it's going to be a little more diffuse sound. And I can open these ones up even a bit more. Bring the elastics down. Okay, so lots of sound choices. So if I can suggest one thing, it's experiment with some of these things too. Again, we're all stuck at home, so it's not the worst time in the world to try something that you wouldn't normally do. This is kind of what creativity is about: is taking stuff that everybody's got, try and find a different way to use it. Right? Whoop! The alarm going off. Excuse me 1 second. It's 5:15. Cool.
And we've lost our overhead camera.
Oh, okay. Cool. So we lost the overhead camera, we lost the side camera, so now you're just stuck with my face straight on. So I think that I've covered, and I mean, realistically, we could sit and talk about this stuff all day as far as head choices, sound choices, drum construction, all sorts of things like this. Hopefully what we've gotten to today is at least a little bit of, some different ways of thinking about what it is that you do. You're never stuck with right or wrong things. And if, if I can inject a little bit of philosophy into it, don't feel like you're stuck with this is the correct way, or this is how things must be, or this is right and wrong. There are lots of right ways to play stuff. The only things that are wrong are things that are going to hurt you and hurt your equipment. That's really sort of the bottom line. If you are able to play whatever it is you want to play and not damage your gear, not hurt yourself, and your ideas flow out, that's what you should do, right? By all means, try different things. There is, if anybody's telling you you should do this or you should do that, tell them I said to, well, let's be nice about this. But there are lots of ways to improve what you do, and if you want to be a student of this stuff lifelong, you have to take some risks in terms of trying different approaches, listening to different music, trying not different products, but different sounds, play different ways. Do not be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. Like I said at the beginning, I've changed pretty much everything about how I play from the time I started playing. I used to have the death grip on the drumstick, like this kind of thing, and use all elbows. Switched to playing a lot of fingers, French grip, German grip, match grip, traditional grip, thicker sticks, thinner sticks, hickory, maple, oak, bigger cymbals, smaller cymbals. Have changed all of that stuff, height, angle, you name it. And at each sort of turn, there's a little bit of getting used to certain things. But if I've kept the change, it's been for the reasons that it's making me more comfortable, and it makes it easier for me to say what I want to say. So don't at any point be afraid to try different things. Yeah, I guess we're probably getting close to wrapping up, aren't we? Yeah. Cool. So if I want to thank Matt Durant for being such a great producer on this stuff. It's been absolutely invaluable. Matt, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. For the questions, yes, please. That really makes it easier for me to answer questions. I appreciate that. And yeah, everybody just stay safe. Hopefully we can get back out to playing music with each other very soon. All right. Thanks so much for hanging in there. And make sure that you tune into more of these Facebook Live things that Long McQuade puts out. Lots of great information, lots of great people talking about lots of great stuff. All right. Enjoy your afternoon. Thanks so much.